I'm now going to shift gears a little bit. Dr. Fahmida Khatun is joining us by phone after a long trip across the world to come to the United States. So I thank her for joining us. She's provided us a video, which I'm going to play now, but Dr. Khatun will be available for the Q&A sections.
I would like to focus on the economy where I feel comfortable. So we have observed how the political turmoil in Bangladesh during the student-led mass uprising in July and August led to the collapse of the government on 5th of August, 2024. So with this change, the interim government has to work on almost every front to fulfill the ambition of the students and people of the country, which was an anti-discriminatory society. This is extremely challenging as the system has almost collapsed during the last 15 years. Talking of economics, the challenges on the economic front are formidable. Some of these challenges include high inflation, dwindling foreign exchange reserves, inefficiency and corruption in public projects implementation, low tax GDP ratio, low private and foreign investment, a weak financial sector, high non-performing loans in the banking sector, illicit financial outflow, unemployment, and also poverty and inequality. So these challenges are very difficult to deal within a limited time. I just want to touch upon the pattern of economic growth in the country during the past decades or so, very briefly. The economy observed a reasonable rate of growth, even if we discount the growth numbers claimed by the previous government, because we have always discussed about the authenticity and integrity of data. And there was a lack of authenticity of data during the past regime because the numbers were inflated as those were far from reality. So in any case, even if the growth rate was 5 to 6%, the benefits of that growth were not distributed equally among the citizens of the country. I have written earlier that Bangladesh's growth story lacks justice and humanity. And this I described from the point of the distributional aspect of the growth and the qualitative part of the growth. And that is why the student movement for quota reform was the manifestation of bigger problems that policymakers had overlooked for decades. And the demand for quota reform was just the tip of the iceberg of the larger problem that the earlier government failed to recognize. In fact, behind the quota movement was the suppressed anger and deprivation of people which existed for a long time in various forms. And that is why the quota reform movement had transformed into an anti-discrimination movement, and it was participated by people from all walks of life. I'll just mention two issues which reflect the discrimination in the society, which has been existent for several decades. First, I will deal with the issue of employment generation, which was the core reason for the quota reform movement by the students. So we have observed that despite reasonable amount of economic growth during the past 1.5 decades, the economy was not able to generate adequate employment for the young population. Every year, about 2 million people enter the labor market in the country, but the scope for employment generation is very limited. One of the reasons for that is the private investment has been stagnant for over a decade or so. The private investment has been hovering about 23 to 24% of the gross domestic product of the economy. And that is why it has limited capacity to create employment for the people who enter the labor market every year. And the public sector That is why it became the only reliable source for employment, which has been expanded, but that not that much also. So in the public sector, there are increases in salaries, there are opportunities for perks, job security, power. So that is why the government jobs became the most coveted job in the labor market. However, the public sector jobs were reserved for certain sectors. In fact, over 50% of the jobs in the public sector had been reserved for certain groups. That is why the job market in the public sector became also very squeezed for the students, common students who were graduating from the universities and colleges. In fact, if you look at the numbers again, the official unemployment rate is 3.53% according to the Labor Force Survey of Bangladesh Bureau of Statistics, which is a huge underestimation because they also show that youth unemployment rate is 8%. But the fact is that the youth who are aged between 15 and 24 years, who are not in employment, education, and training, that is need, that is 40.6%, in fact, which is very high, because these are the youth who are not engaged in any form in the society. So clearly, Bangladesh's economic growth could not create enough jobs. And whatever jobs were created, most of them were actually in the informal sector. About 85% of the total jobs were in the informal sector, where income and job security are very low. So the second issue I would reflect on regarding the discrimination part is the growing inequality in Bangladesh. We have observed that while the economy was growing, inequality was growing as well. The official statistics again has shown that this is the 2022 data of the Bangladesh Bureau of Statistics that shows that the top 5% of the population possessed about 30% of the national income, whereas the bottom 5% own only 0.37% of the national income. And it has increased compared to 2016 data by the Bangladesh Bureau of Statistics. So first of all, the interim government has to ensure political stability and also restore law and order situation, because these are preconditions for economic prosperity and economic growth. The political turmoil which we have observed during the student-led movement, and also some of the actions by the previous government, for example, internet blackout, all these have an impact on the economy in the immediate term, and also it will have an impact in the medium term. In fact, the economy now requires reforms. There is a need for institutional reforms for bringing discipline in the economic system and also bring back the discipline in the economy, because we have observed due to the systematic weakening of the economic institutions, the macroeconomic stability which we have observed over the years, that has been weakened. And this is because all the economic indicators which I have mentioned earlier, those are now on a downward trend. And we have observed that the institutions have been systematically weakened because the policymakers did not show much enthusiasm for improving the governance. But as we all know that without good governance, the inclusive and sustained economic growth is not possible. And this was the core demand of the student-led movement, that to have an equitable society which will be inclusive. But we have seen that the institutions over the years have become extractive in nature, because there has been a nexus of various players, the political elites, corrupt political elites, the civil bureaucracy, the military bureaucracy, the privileged group of the private sector, law enforcing agencies, they all have become part of the system which were engaged in extracting public resources. So the challenges for the interim government are humongous. The corruption model which have been created over the years, over the decades, have benefited certain groups which I have mentioned by depriving the larger sections of the people. So on the whole, the list for the interim government for immediate and midterm measures are long, but some of the measures will have to start during the interim government, which should be carried out in the next government also when the new elected government will come. But the initiatives have to be taken now, and this is the time. Thank you very much.